Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing very well. Let's talk about foreign policy for a change.
No.
Well, you know, when I think about foreign policy and talking about political people who might be with us on foreign policy and cut back spending, in a way, if they did that, maybe for a different reason, but they did it, it is an economic issue.
Yeah.
We say that, foreign policy is an economic issue because it drains and if you save money. But today, we're not going to be talking so much about our budget. We're going to be talking about our policy, and I don't know who's really in charge. The president is responsible.
Yeah.
We have Bolton's making a lot of noise, and he has a lot of clout. But this fellow Pompeo is trying to make a name for himself. He was always out there doing something, and recently he's really been in the news. And this week especially, he's been talking about China once again, and the trade deal is going on, and he's always involved in that. And right now there's a scheduled event for Friday. Yesterday, sort of in the midst of some negotiations going on and where people were relatively optimistic about the U.S. and China talking, and it wasn't rattling the market that much. So they, all of a sudden, Trump says, it's off. We're going to put on tariffs on Friday. Just out of the clear blue. So this catches, it shouldn't totally surprise anybody. It could disappoint people, but China had to react. You do that, 1 minute later, it's on the books, it's scheduled. A minute after you put them on, we're putting these on, which sounds almost like a trade war going on.
Yeah.
But so far, the markets haven't complained too much. For instance, when they heard the talks were breaking down, the market went up, I think, over 600 points. But then it recovered because all of a sudden they said, well, the Vice Chairman Liu from China is coming over to talk. We don't want to close out. So there was a little bit of hope, and the market soars again. Boy, how would you like to be a day trader on that? I don't think I'd like that.
Nerves of steel.
So he changes his mind. It looks like it's going to happen, but also right now it's uncertainty. And we're wondering, and we put this in our title, is this part of a strategy, or is Trump just flip-flopping all over the place? Because he's a dealer. He has the art of the deal. And there's claim that he wins all of these, which I think has to be sort of more objectively looked at. So, but at least this is going on. So I tend to think that it is not long-term strategy. I think it's impulsive strategy, but nevertheless, it's a big deal because not only did we set the stage for this acceleration of the trade war, we decided, well, why don't we send our war vessels all through the South China Sea? That'd be like China and Russia all of a sudden invading and having war games in the Gulf of Mexico. So we're over there doing this, proving that we can do it. And then what does China do? They put their troops on high alert. So it's on and on again, but so far they've been able to avoid the really, really big clash. But that doesn't mean that this doesn't have results, because even if it is not hostilities and a hot war, this trade war is a lot more serious than people realize. That this can be very, very harmful to both economies and the world economy, and it could lead into something which later on might create the hot war. But right now, I think the big issue is Trump going to stick to his guns? Is he going to put those tariffs on? Massive increase on tariffs on Friday, and will China retaliate? So that is the big issue now, and I think there'll be a lot of people on pins and needles, and I think the markets will be watching it carefully. The markets not all telltale on what's going to happen, but you can get some pretty good hints. A lot of them, billions, if trillions of dollars aren't invested, they weigh these things. So right now, they're nervous. So we'll find out Friday probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, and the strategic uncertainty seems to be a hallmark of the Trump administration, where there's really not a lot of things you can grasp. You have to wonder if it's a strength or a weakness. And we saw it with North Korea, where the two of them, Kim and Trump, were going at each other with trading insults, and next thing they're good buddies. There's some speculation now with regard to Iran that a lot of this ratcheting up of the rhetoric and the aggressiveness on the part of the U.S. is potentially in advance of some negotiations between Trump and Rouhani. So is this just another example of the way Trump operates, which is to, kick the heck out of your opponent and then sit down? It's a big question, and the stakes are high.
And whenever there's an opportunity, they seem to be able to add fuel to the fire. So this week, maybe it was yesterday, that the Arctic Council met. Heck, not too many people know about it, so I had to go and say, how long have we had this? Well, it's been around for a while, and these are the 8 countries that have a little bit of land or a lot of land within the Arctic Circle. And so they have a council dealing with it. It's supposed to work out property rights and things like that. But Russia has a lot of land up there. And China is not involved. They say they're near Arctic, but they're really not involved. But it's the Norwegian, Norway, those countries. But we have a little bit of Alaska in there. So Pompeo was there, and he was so upset, and he was getting out there lecturing. You got to be careful. China now has invested in some projects within the Arctic Circle, and he was acting like they never even asked me. So this is just sort of more than is necessary. In the midst of the military strategy build up and the tariff strategy, but they never miss anything that we're in charge. And there's been a statement that real development around the Arctic Circle, in the Arctic Circle, probably isn't going to come next week or next month, and I guess they're betting on that there'll be no ice on the North Pole forever, and therefore we'll have to move up there and see what we can do with it.
Well, on that note, Michael Krieger, who runs the Liberty Blitzkrieg blog that we do enjoy occasionally, he makes some interesting points, and I shared it with you earlier. Zero Hedge picked it up, that he really contends that the U.S. and China are on a major collision course, regardless of the trade issue, and he has a good line here. He says, many assume that the trade war is about trade, when in reality it's about geopolitical power. In the U.S., either China rolls over and capitulates or it fights back. Krieger thinks that China will fight back. So the issue, I think, is bigger than just this week.
And you can expand that desire for geopolitical power. What about the occupation of space?
Yeah.
There's been declarations, even back, I was looking at that when Bush was president. He was making declarations of, you better watch out, we have to control the space. So these things, it is power. But there's also the money and the issues and the war and the profits in the military-industrial complex. All these things get together and they're put together. But power is really a tremendous motivation, especially once you have a lot of money. This is even true in economics. Some of these corporations that are huge, they're $1 trillion corporations. Guys are making billions of dollars. You think, well, why are they really worried about all this? They don't need any more money. What do they do with the money? But I think it's the power, even economic power, individuals and corporations, which too often blend in with government power too, because they become more fascist leaning by the big corporations and governments. When we look at social media and a few other things, there is a collaboration between corporations and our governments, and it's power, and that's what they seem to enjoy, especially after they have a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, there is kind of this perception, and particularly among some conservatives who are embracing this idea of economic nationalism, that Trump is just playing a hard game with the Chinese, and he's going to get a good deal for us, or he's going to slap those sanctions on. That'll show them. And Bob Monzel, I don't know if you noticed this, but he interviewed George Shultz, who's 98 and still active. But he asked him about this China stuff, and he said, this is tariffs or taxes. He almost sounded like you, tariffs or taxes. But so there's a misperception that, yeah, he's playing tough, but the Chinese aren't going to suffer they're not going to suffer alone if this goes on, this 25% tariff.
No, they're not going to be bashful, and they have their problems because they're not a true free market economy, and they don't have good record on civil liberties. But you could turn around and say that we have our failures too. But one of the biggest failures for us and the rest is the malinvestment factor. There's a lot of money. But if you understand that when there's a development of an economy based on interest rates which are artificially very low, and in our case near zero, you're going to have a lot of mistakes. And the biggest mistake that occurs there is part domestic and foreign. And that is debt. And that's what this has built up. They'll be beyond the control of governments and all this geopolitical stuff. When you have a debt collapse, like in the midst of the 30s, it was very difficult to maintain order of the old order. And we ended up with a new order, which was very, very bad as a consequence, of the Depression, which of course was a consequence of bad foreign policies during World War I and Versailles Treaty. So all these things have consequences. So this is something that will be around, but there's going to be a struggle for economic and political power. And sorting this out is important. And try to make at least a suggestion. On my first suggestion is look to ourselves. Find out that maybe we have some things that we can change on, when we look at it personally or nationally, that we can change things if it's contributing. And it's not to say that we are absolutely perfect and we don't have to look at anything else. But if you look at the imperfections of our country, whether it's the monetary policy and how we influence, so we still are the biggest influencer in economic power and in military power, because we have the wealth, we have the weapons, and we have the economy, and we have the dollar. But the whole point is there's an end stage, and it's usually related to an unsustainable debt. And when you look at some statistics now that this debt is not sustainable. One of these days you're going to see people giving up on it and realize it can't be paid. Just like, the student debt is $1.6 trillion. Well, it's not going to be paid for. They're already defaulting on it. Eventually, I think it's going to be wiped off, and there'll be repercussions. But that's only a little bit of what can happen when an economy that the world has right now sort of runs out of steam, whether it's China or U.S.
Well, we've got a deadline, as you said off camera, almost a D-Day kind of thing. But let's say Trump isn't bluffing and he's serious, and this thing breaks down and he says, okay, that's it. 12:01 a.m., we're going to have 25% tariffs on this basket of goods. What's your take? How would that affect the average American?
Well, the next day, if it's a serious business, it will be the markets. The markets react very, very quickly. And eventually could be the precipitating factor that there'll be defaults. There will be a probably rising interest rates in spite of the fact that they're at zero. If it shakes, the market is so far removed from what we have. It's sort of, to me, like when we maintained the illusion that the dollar was worth $35 an ounce for 20-some years, and it wasn't. Well, finally, something happened, and they had to admit that dollar was not that valuable. And that's what would happen. I think it would usher in, not the next day or two, the big thing will be the markets. And people, even the corporations and the banks, are going to be worried about it. And then they're going to start recognizing this looks like it could be bigger than '09, and how are we, and the bailouts might not work. So within a year or two, I think if they don't stop this nonsense, and if they expand the trade war and then follow up and in parallel and have these threats of war going on, I think in 2 or 3 years, the average American citizen is going to be very, very unhappy. And I think there will be not only a trade war, there's going to be depression-like conditions throughout the world. So to me, it's very important. That's why I just can't quite believe they're that dumb. That by midnight, that they just go, no, we're going to do it. And it might be this whole thing that we talk about, playing chicken. They might know that, but we're going to play a little chicken on this. We'll see who backs down. So far, somebody backs down, and Trump's capable of backing away from this. And, he has done that when some of his advisors get to him and say, hey, look, you got to back down on this. I think that there's going to be effort before that, and that, of course, would maybe save us from those bad times ahead if they go through.
So he's almost opening a Pandora's box if he does this. That can't be helpful to him for 2020 if he's going to run on the economy.
No, that's for sure. And, the economy is real important. But the economy didn't help the Republicans, last year in the election. So it is very important. I've always argued that people vote from their belly. One thing that might explain that is people are worse off than the statistics that we hear about. And we've talked about that too. Yeah. That when you look at the labor participation rate, all of a sudden it's not bad to magic, and that the unemployment numbers are much greater and the inflation rate is much higher. So maybe the economic conditions, was a factor. And of course that's what the far left wants you to believe, because they'll need to have, that'll be the reason why you really need socialism, because we want to be like Venezuela.
Well, I would just close with a couple of housekeeping things. I want to thank everyone who participated in our April fundraiser. The response was huge, so I apologize. The books haven't been mailed yet, but we're mailing them now, so you'll get your books for participating. We really, really appreciate your support. I also want to remind everyone we are getting close to our Houston conference. You want to come, you want to hear Dr. Paul speak, you want to hear the other great speakers on the drug war. Go to ronpaulinstitute.org/conference. That'll get you all the info for Dr. Paul. We're close to selling out. We've got a few more tickets. We want to make sure everyone gets there. Visit with Jacob Solom, John Beza, Paul Armentano, and the others. Talk about ending the drug war.
Very good. And I'm going to close out by making a comment about tariffs, because I've been a bit surprised that we've gotten this far along in this tariff war going on. Some people don't want to call it a war, but there is a tariff struggle. And after the clear evidence that the tariffs in the Depression was a big factor in making the Depression a lot worse, that generally speaking, even though there were always some tariffs on, the economists, mainstream economists, didn't step out of line, because they were accepting the fact that, you don't brag about tariffs. That's secret. That's just to manipulate a bit. But tariffs aren't good, and they recognize that, because most people do realize that a tariff, when we put a tariff on China, we're not punishing China. We do punish some of the Chinese people, but we really punish the American people because we raise taxes on them, import taxes. So this is something that really baffles me, that they've gone along with this. And now I think that it's been a strategy, because there's been tariffs, but then there's some type of imbalances with it. But I think that should indicate that they should move closer to a free market economy. But this thing is, maybe we'll be at a climactic point this week. So I certainly will be watching it closely, and even before Friday, I think there'll be a pretty good indicator, and it'll be found in the market. The markets will be able to. So if the markets go down 2,000 or 3,000 points by Friday, that means that tariffs are probably going to be going, and that there will be a tariff war. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.